Here we go.
So just to remind us what we're doing here, so it makes it kind of really real for us, not just some kind of Tibetan ritual, you know. Remembering karma, every thought counts, nothing goes astray. So that's really the basis of this. It's not just some empty ideas and strange concepts, you know, not just imagining something, which is how we think. So we're visualizing, we're imagining the entire universe. If we know Buddha's cosmological view of the universe, then fine. If not, then just think of our own world and think of, basically, what we're doing is we're imagining all the marvelous things of the world that make people happy, the objects of the senses, basically, and we imagine piling it up and offering it to the Buddha as a request for the teachings. That's the plan. And has great meaning and leaves very marvelous imprints in the mind.
Sashi pergi yushi meto Dramri raplinji Nide gyan padi Sangye jindu meche hulwagi Rukunanda shila Chepakshu Jetsun lama Dampekinam Kiche kukala Kien se chu tri Jita sampe Duje sin mala Sakye chu chikicha Raptu so.
And as we say this Sanskrit mantra next, we imagine the Buddha happily receiving our offering.
Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamiya Chayami.
So as always, these two parts, reminding ourselves of our reliance on the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and then thinking that may all the karmic seeds we plant in our mind by listening to these teachings, may these seeds ripen in the future as our Buddhahood, no matter how long it takes, it doesn't matter, so that we can be of benefit to others. So I said one time more words in English to really get the meaning, and then we'll do 2 times in Tibetan. So we're saying, you know, until we are enlightened, we will rely upon the Buddha, his teachings, and the Sangha, the community of practitioners. And so by the virtuous karmic seeds we leave in our mind, by this marvelous virtuous karmic seeds, you know, as we continue to nourish these seeds that we plant by listening to these teachings, may they eventually ripen as my Buddhahood. And then I'm perfectly qualified to be of benefit to every single sentient being. Sangye charang soke chognam la jang chu baru dagni kyab suchi dagi chönyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye drupa shok sangye charang soke chognam la jang chu baru dagni kyab suchi dagi chönyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye drupa shok. Okay. So I'm hoping you've all read Sangye Kado's teachings, because it's really, she covers everything so clearly in the course notes. So really, in a way, the course notes are the basis of this course. And I'm just kind of putting chat on top, you know, because I might not say things exactly that she says, but she's covering it all really nicely. Each of the course notes covering everything thoroughly. So you need to study the course notes. I really request you, you know, just a little bit each time. And then I'm just adding stuff on top that kind of maybe hopefully give a taste to it, take a different slant on it, trying different ways, you know. This is, I mean, just listening to me won't be enough, okay? You need to read the course notes. So, okay, so what Venerable Sangye Kado has done in the first section is just generally talk about the mind, what it is. And as we know, we've done the module 1 where we talked about the mind, because after all, it is the mind that meditates, you know, that's the first point. And the other crucial point that's fundamental to the entirety of the Buddha's teachings from A to Z, which is the basis of why we meditate, you know, and Sangye Kado points this out, is to become familiar. The word to meditate in Tibetan, it's quite surprising to us, because we have so many weird concepts of what we think meditation is. That the verb to meditate is to familiarize. So really what you're trying to do as a Buddhist is familiarize your mind with what? Well, it's not complicated. Look at the word Buddha. I always quote this, but it really grounds us. Buddha, the etymology of the word Buddha implies the eradication of all the delusions. Da implies the development to perfection of all the goodness and virtue. That's it. It's almost too simple. So if that's what the end result is, it's obvious that the job of being a Buddhist, and this is the techniques of meditation are the skills we use to do this job formally, is to familiarize our mind with virtue and wisdom. I mean, that's it. And to defamiliarize our mind with delusions. That's the essential job from here to Buddhahood of a Buddhist. If you don't get that, then you've lost, we're not clear what it means. And as Sanghakari points out, there are lots of ideas in the world about why you should meditate. So first of all, everybody's allowed to have whatever definition they like. Buddha does not have copyright on it. But if you want to know what the Buddha's view is, you need to know what Buddha means. Don't just assume your view of meditation is what is meant by Buddhism. And that's the biggest problem, And the other one is there are so many concepts of why you would meditate and what you think it is. So obviously one of the concepts is that you're doing it to feel better. You're doing it to make all the thoughts go away. You're doing it to have some kind of special experiences. These are the common views, That's not the point. None of these is the point. None of these is the point. The point is to develop. So, okay, when we understand, again, the broader picture that all the thousands of meditation techniques, and once you understand the principle, you can make up your own every day. You can do that, once you understand what you're doing. But the essential, all of the thousands of techniques within Buddhism come down to two modes of meditation, precisely. So as we know, if we've studied the Lam Rim, these are taught at the end of the entire path as the fifth and sixth of the six perfections, and they're called the perfection, the perfection of accomplishing single-pointed concentration, or shamatha. Samadhi is concentration. Shamatha is meaning calm, abiding, which is the name given to the result of this concentration technique, which is vaguely in the world known as roughly what people think of as mindfulness meditation, very vaguely. So that's the first technique, and that comes from these Hindus. It's not even technically Buddhist. And second, the reason you have concentration, the only reason you want concentration, even though itself, as Lama Yeshe points out in Mahamudra, his marvelous book, there are so many incredible results of just achieving concentration. And I'm saying this now, but you can be forgiven for thinking you've become enlightened, because the potential of the mind is so astonishing, and you really begin to taste the potential of your own mind when you've got concentration, but that's not even the point. It's like all the bliss and the joy and the clarity, they're like a bonus. The only reason you need to have concentration, and the only reason you need to plumb the depths of your mind to get to the subtlest level of your mind, beyond conceptual, beyond the grosser level of uncontrolled chat, beyond the sensory, is so that you can use this laser-like focused mind to do the second mode of meditation, where you get insight, vipassana. Insight into what? Well, broadly, all the teachings, you need insight into karma, insight into impermanence. Insight is this wonderful word in English. It's very clear. Inner experience of something. And you know that perfectly well in ordinary life. You first listen to the theory about how to make a cake. You get the recipe clear. You then think it through at the kitchen, get your eggs and your flour and your this and your that. You're thinking it through as you're doing it. And then you get insight into it when you finally get the cake. It's not complicated, but we make it complicated. We make it fantastical, So insight means inner experience of something when it's the truth for you. You can know the theory 1 + 1 is 2, but you go home and do your homework and you get the inner experience. Oh, I get it. You will say, that's an inner experience. That's an insight. It's a very simple word. So obviously, as a Buddhist, what we are trying to do is turn our mind into the mind of a Buddha, to get insight into what Buddha is telling us is the way reality is. And because we've chosen to buy into Buddha's views, taking them as our working hypothesis, through the techniques of listening, thinking, and then finally meditating at this subtler level, when we've got single-pointed concentration, that is when we will get direct, non-conceptual insight into all the points of the path, and thus eventually become a Buddha. So it's extremely practical. We've got to bring it down to earth, So within all that, within the Buddhism, there's so many formal techniques that are taught. And there's, there are a few mentioned here, Sanghakari mentions, so we can do some. But like I said, once you understand the theory, the techniques, you can make up your own. Of course you can, They're not set in stone. So why don't we just sit there here for a few minutes and just start with getting the posture clear. Sanghikara talks about this. Let's just get our posture clear, and we'll do 5 minutes of concentrating on the breath. And then we will unpack that a little bit. Once we've done it, we'll unpack it. So this is always the first step. One of the first things that Lord Buddha taught in the concentration meditation technique was to concentrate. You got to concentrate on something. You got to anchor your mind to something. So here he's taught the breath. Why not? It happens naturally. You don't have to conjure the breath. It's just there. So you anchor your mind to that sensation. But there's many ways you can do it. We'll just do it one particular way. But let's get our body clear first. There's a position of the body, like 7 or 8 points that all the great yogis over the centuries have found to enable the body to be most conducive to the job, the mind doing its job, because your body doesn't meditate. Our problem in our culture, we're so addicted to our bodies. We so totally think there's just one big lump of me here. We hardly even distinguish between body and mind. We don't think like that. But the body is obviously necessary, because it's if the body's not comfortable, the body's in the wrong position, the mind can't do its job. So it's the 7 or 8 points. So let's just settle down into it. First, the ideal one, as His Holiness the Dalai Lama always says, where I read one time, he said, it's really auspicious if you can begin, this is the first point, by having the legs in full lotus position. So of course, if you've been brought up in a culture where you sit down on the floor and sit cross-legged, it'll be very easy. But as he said, it's really marvelous, just even for a second, to sit in that position. It's very auspicious for your ability in the future. It kind of puts the imprint in the mind or in yourself for the future to be able to do that. Because in the most advanced stages in Vajrayana, when you're practicing the completion stage, the most advanced stages of Vajrayana practice, it's said to be appropriate, necessary to sit in this position. And the greatest yogis who live in their mountain caves for months and years, they can stay. This position is so powerful that because the body is so stable, you can sit in the deepest samadhi for days and weeks and months without toppling over. That's its advantage, And it's practical, therefore. So that means to have your legs up and the right one in front. You see the statues of the Buddha, the right one in front, as you can see maybe here, and then the left, each on the other thigh, and the right in front of the left. That's the ideal one. So that's the first point, the legs. If you can't do that, have half lotus. If not that, regular cross-legged. And of course, if not that, for most of us, probably sitting in a chair, and I'll discuss that in a second. So the second part is the cushion under your bottom. So really, if you've got very flexible legs, and then your legs will be flat on the floor, sitting in this full lotus, then you'd have a cushion just propping you up under your coccyx. So it kind of thrusts you slightly up and slightly forward. So it gives a feeling of really being very upright, very stable. But of course, because if you don't sit cross-legged in full lotus, you need to find the cushion that works for you, the height and so on, That's 2 points. The legs and then the bottom. And then they mention the back, So of course our back is not really straight. The spine is quite, curvy, but you have your body upright. And this, when you understand the Vajrayana, the way we're described, the way we are constructed, we've got gross body and mind, which is the one we can see and touch, the body. And then we've got the subtle body and subtle mind. And this is what they use in the Tibetan medical system, similar to the Chinese system. You've got these 72,000 subtle channels, subtle nervous system throughout the entire body. And coursing through all those channels, all these different wind energies, the prana. I mean, they studied 12, 14 years of this. This is the basis of health in both the Chinese and the Tibetan systems. So that these winds course through all these channels. And this is the point, linked inextricably to all these wind energies is our different states of mental consciousness. This is subtle mind. Mental consciousness, which is all the thoughts and feelings and emotions, is subtle mind. Sensory is gross mind. So all the states of mind are inextricably linked to their own set of the 4 elements, and particularly here, the winds. So the way, if the body is slumping, then these channels are kind of constricted. The winds can't flow properly. And because the winds are connected to the mind can't function properly. So you become dull and you'll go to sleep, So to have your body upright is important. So now if you're sitting in a chair, then you must not slump in the back of the chair. This is really important. You must sit forward and have your legs your feet firmly planted on the ground. So the sitting in a very comfortable sofa is not appropriate if you want to meditate. And this is what shows, this indicates already one of the misconceptions, that we think meditation is to do with relaxing. There are marvelous relaxation techniques taught in yoga. We need relaxing, there's no doubt. But this technique is absolutely not a relaxation technique. You've really got to be clear about this. So your body upright. Now what happens is, as soon as you put your body upright, we all know this, you tense your muscles, don't you? Especially the abdomen. So, and this is my saying, they don't say this in the text. So put your body up, have your body upright, and now flop your muscles. Leave the body upright, but flop the muscles. This is really important. In the text, they talk about the fourth point is the shoulders. Have them upright, square, but not tense. So just get your body upright, shoulders square, but relax the muscles, but keep the body, but don't slump the body. That's a really good combination. I always think of it as like your spine, you know, if your whole skeleton. If your skeleton were hanging on a hanger, everything is upright, everything is completely straight, but then the flesh is like on the bones, on the skeleton, but totally relaxed. It's important. So that's the bottom, the legs, the back, the shoulders, and I'm adding the muscles, all the muscles. Relax the muscles, flop the muscles. I think abdomen especially. We don't like looking fat, so we always squeeze our stomach in, don't we? It's ridiculous. Flop the muscles. Now, the hands. There's many mudras. I mean, you know, there's this marvelous, one of our marvelous lamas, Geshe Lama Kontrok, who passed away 20 years ago, whose reincarnation is now Sarah J Monastery studying. Amazing great yogi, unbelievable, amazing great yogi, lived in Vajrayogini's Pure Land, living in caves naked for years and years and years. And so in this biography of his, which we began to write, I was working with his attendant. It's not finished yet, but it'll come eventually. And the first time one of the local people, he's up in the mountains. It was up in the mountains in, I'm telling you a story now, so never mind. Up in the mountains near Tsum, right up in the border, way up in the corner top part of Nepal, where it is on the border of Tibet. And it was where Milarepa used to meditate. And he meditated there for years and years in total isolation. And when he met one of the first people who met him in the cave, it was so moving. But the thing that struck me about it, there he was naked, sitting there in full lotus in samadhi for days and days and days. But his hands weren't in the mudra; they were on his lap, and the two thumbs in his were in his palm. So obviously there's some logic to that. But the one we're classically taught like that, the one we're classically taught is to have the left underneath, right on top, and the thumbs touching like this, resting nicely in your lap, that's the typical one. But eventually, as you learn to meditate, you can find the one that works for you. Then the head, finally the head, several points about the head. Every one of these points is coming from the experience of the great yogis over the centuries, okay? They've got logic to them. They're practical. So the head slightly tilted forward. If your head is thrust back, your mind gets agitated, slightly tilted forward, chin tucked in. Then the jaw relaxed and the lips slightly apart. And then the tip of the tongue behind the top teeth, which is really odd. But the logic of this is, the yogis have found, is you don't dribble, especially if you're meditating for a long time like they do, for days and weeks, and you don't have to swallow the spit. So your tongue behind the top teeth, just near the palate. Lips apart, jaw relaxed. And then your eyes. Well, again, the yogis have found, if they meditate day and night, or even just meditate in the day, because there's light. When there's light there, and the mind needs to, one of the key things about meditation, concentration, you've got to keep the mind sharp, crystal clear, otherwise you're dull, So the mind, having the light, having your eyes open and the light coming in keeps your mind sharp. But of course, if we don't have proper concentration, the yogis have gone inwards. They don't get distracted by the external objects. Of course, we would probably. So for us, maybe just for this 3-minute session we're going to do, 5 minutes, have your eyes lightly closed. But your eyeballs beneath the eyelids, looking down, okay? Looking down. So you settle into this position now, okay? Your bottom, your legs, your back, shoulders, your muscles, hands, head slightly forward, chin tucked in, lips apart, jaw relaxed, tip of the tongue behind the top teeth, eyes looking down, and then settle into this position and then forget about it. Because it ain't your body that meditates, people. We're so addicted to our body. We kind of feel, oh, I'm meditating. Well, no, you're not, until your mind does the proper job. Okay, so now next step, what we're going to do is we're going to locate the object of our concentration. Mind is known as the subject, and it always has to have an object. It's always something it cognizes. Mind is that which cognizes, and there is always something that our mind does cognize. So that's the object. So here we're going to locate that sensation at the tip of our nose. That's it. We're going to locate that sensation. So take a couple of breaths, just natural breaths, and then locate that sensation. And you're going to see it's slightly different from when you breathe in and when you breathe out, slightly different. But that general area, that's our focal point. So locate it first, okay? Get very precise. Locate it. Couple of breaths in and out, just to locate it. And it's quite a broad area, really, where you feel the air, isn't it? The sensation. Okay, so we've chosen now the object of our focus. So the job we're going to do, and this is it, get past all the religious ideas, holy ideas, nonsense ideas. It's a really simple, practical technique. It's something very, very simple. The job we are attempting to do is keep our attention on that sensation. That is the job, all right? Nothing more. Not to have nice feelings, not to make the thoughts go away, not to have visions, none of that. It's simply the job you're attempting to do is keep your attention on that sensation. So with determination, we make that decision now. Intention. I am going to watch the breath. The part of I that watches the breath, and we'll talk about this, is the attention. There's many parts of your mind all doing their job. So attention watches the breath. So now just for reference, it's helpful to understand this. So what happens is we know perfectly well the thoughts will just rage on and we'll get seduced by the thoughts and we'll forget about the breath. The attention will wander off to something else. We know that. So you've got the next part of your mind that is doing a job. It's hard for us to identify these, but this is the way it is another part that's now, attention's watching the breath is one part of the mind. Another part called mindfulness, which is the ability to not forget what you're doing, is a very specific function. Its job is to bring the mind, bring the attention back to the breath. So it's got to be watching like a hawk every time attention wanders off. It's like, every time attention wanders off, mummy mindfulness brings it back to the breath. And then attention wanders off, mindfulness brings it back to the breath. And if you have to do that 50 times a minute, you have a good meditation. Because what happens mostly is we space out, So that's your job. That's it. Think of two bits of your mind. Attention watches, mindfulness watches the attention, and mindfulness quietly puts it back on the object, on the breath when it wanders off. So with determination for 3 minutes, 3 quality minutes. And this is what you're going to do. That's it. Watch the breath. Just bring the attention back to the breath. That's it. Just the breath. That's it. Just the breath. Let the thoughts come and go. Don't think they shouldn't be there. Let them be there. Don't pay attention to them. Pay attention to the breath. Just the breath. Okay, relax. That was about three minutes, 3 and a bit minutes. We did an entire meditation. We did an entire retreat with Lama Yeshe, and he made us do 5-minute sessions. It's very interesting, you know, and it's very powerful because most of us, if we sit there and do for 20 minutes or 30 minutes or 45 minutes or God knows what, actually 99% of it we're spacing out. But sometimes because people feel this is one of the biggest problems. So really now here, we did briefly discuss this last week, but let's look a little bit more at this. Let's look at the actual technical things involved in accomplishing concentration. We can see the benefit, can't we? If we can manage to get that mindfulness, if, you know, when the mind wanders off and gets involved in all the chat, mindfulness's job is like watching to grab the attention and to bring it back. And so you can see it's very powerful. If you can keep staying on the breath and not buying into all the thousands of thoughts, then you stop it. What you're doing is you're stopping putting fuel on the fire, so the fire will not, you know, the fire will calm down. I mean, that's the ideal. That's the point. So, of course, this concentration we're describing, attempting to get, it's not possible for us in an ordinary daily life unless we're a great yogi from past lives to achieve it while doing a few sessions a day in daily life. You need to give up daily life things because the level of concentration that we're trying to accomplish that they describe in the text is a level of mind that we don't even posit as existing in modern psychological systems, you know, or in neuroscience. It's beyond the senses altogether. You know, so it's a way more subtle level of mind. We need to understand that. And that's, of course, why we study the mind first. We didn't touch enough on all that. The mind's got these subtler levels of cognition, you know. So the two main, this is how they describe the concentration, the end result of this technique is called, as I said, called calm abiding. And it's described in terms of 9 stages. Well, basically, if you, and at some point this time or next week, I'll read you from Pabonka Rinpoche's Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand. He has a summary, you know, of each of these 9 stages. And it all sounds quite technical to us, but it's very interesting to hear it. But basically, the 2 main obstacles to concentration are the tendency of the mind to be overexcited, which is really attachment mind. Attachment has many functions, and one of its functions is this never-ending thinking things, chat, constantly conceptualizing, you know, the mind overexcited. Then the other extreme is obvious, is when the mind spaces out. So they technically call them excitement and dullness, excitement and dullness. And really, you can look in the text, this gradual development of these 9 stages is the gradual elimination of the dullness and the excitement, to the point where you've perfected your mindfulness, and then you no longer need to worry about that. And you keep going to ever more subtle levels, until eventually you've got absolute effortless concentration at this subtler level. So, of course, as you know, as I keep quoting, and Lama Yeshe would always try to get us excited. And in his Mahamudra book, he just discusses some of the qualities you'd accomplish. And like Lama says, it's almost, in our world, it's unbelievable, not possible, because the mind is so remarkable, so amazing, so talented, so capable. It's incredible. So most of us, of course, we're probably not going to give up sex, drugs, and rock and roll and our pussycats and our mortgages and go to the mountains. That's okay. But we can still practice this technique. So one of our biggest failings, I'd say, is not that you don't get concentration, but that we have all these weird expectations and then criticize ourselves. People say, oh, I can't meditate, my thoughts are so busy. I mean, that's a contradiction in terms. Of course you can meditate. It doesn't, but you've got this expectation that your thoughts should stop overnight. That's completely bizarre. That's like thinking you could climb on a bike for the first time and ride like Lance Armstrong. Don't be ridiculous. You've got to be much more humble and reasonable, but you've got to know technically what you're trying to do. And in other words, we've got all these wrong assumptions about meditation. We think of, really in the world, we think of it as an alternative to a pill. Somehow there's something magic in sitting down and crossing your eyes or crossing your legs or whatever, and something magical will happen. It's so superstitious, really. And even when you hear it, some fundamentalist religious people say that by meditating, you invite the devil in. It really shows that God knows what we think of, what the mind is. It's so bizarre, So concentration, is to simply train that part of your mind called attention. There's many, many, many parts of your mind all working together beautifully to have our moment by moment experiences. And like we talked briefly last time in the last module, when you look at the different mechanics of the mind, I like to call it that, there are the parts of the mind, for example, there are 5 always present particular states of mind. One is called intention, volition, I will. Then there's called attention, when your mind homes in on that thing. This is the part that is watching the breath, if you like, but it's helped by all the other pieces. So like I said, the other piece is doing the major job right now is the one called mindfulness, which is simply the ability to not forget what you're doing moment by moment. But its job is to, it's like sort of a mummy watching, the mother watching attention, and attention is like a little child. Every time attention wanders off, mindfulness brings it back. That's the job you're doing. That is the literal technique that you're doing. So, of course, as you progress, hopefully, possibly, no expectations, the attention might stay for 2 seconds on the breath, which means mindfulness just sits there and watches. And eventually you've perfected the mindfulness. Now you've got totally continuity of memory moment by moment on what you're doing. And that's what leads eventually to concentration. So that's why it's so important to understand these bits of the mind. You see, one of our biggest problems also with meditation, we say, I am meditating. I am watching the breath. And we get all caught up about the witness and all these dramas inside. How could I be watching I? How could the mind watch the mind? We get also intellectually kind of tied up in knots, Just keep it simple, please. I will say, I am holding a thermos. Well, it's a truth. Well, let's get specific. Which part of I? Well, my right hand. Let's get more specific. Which part of my right hand? Well, then you'll see there are 5 digits here and the palm, and they've all got their job. They're all working beautifully together. That's exactly with your mind. All the bits of your mind are working together. There's a certain function for each piece, and they all work harmoniously together to do the job of keeping your mind on the breath, to get this concentration, So it's an excellent one to do as a starting point. You can also do it as its own technique. Of course, many people, like I mentioned, if you go off into retreat, I always quote Venerable Rene, this marvelous Swiss monk, who's in California. I think he's living in California, I'm not sure where. Maybe living in, now he's living in Washington. Lama Zopa Rinpoche is a retreat center, I think. And he's been a professional meditator for like 45 years, And I remember interviewing him. I mentioned this, interviewing him in Mandala magazine back in '95 about one of his first retreats, 2.5-year retreat. And he said he maybe got to the 5th of the 9 stages. So let's look at this. I mean, okay, I'm going to a bit too much depth here about this particular technique. No, maybe I'm not. So that's okay. So then Venerable Rene said, just to even get concentration, he made a decision to go off into retreat to get it, to get single point, to achieve this karma abiding. So he did 2.5 years, and he said he knew he couldn't get past the 5th of the 9 stages. So this gets me to one other point. If we're going to be doing a retreat, there are various factors, and Pabonka talks about this in Liberation, that that ideal prerequisites for a good place. It's not just your mind, you've got to have a conducive environment. So the ideal, if you want to do serious retreat, even for a week, an ideal environment is where it's very quiet, not lots of running water and wild animals everywhere, because you get too distracted. It should be a very peaceful place. It should be where you've got harmonious friends. You should have good quality food. You should be where you can be supported, where you can just be able to focus totally on your retreat. But the other one, the real best one of all, they talk about this, it's a place that's been blessed by the presence of the previous holy beings, because all the Buddhas come to these places, the holy beings and the God and all the Dakas and Dakinis. That's why, when I discuss, there's two of our meditators, Harry and Mary. They're both now several miles north of me in Colorado, I think, at a place called Crestone, where Mary's doing a 3-year retreat. For years and years, they both lived up in the mountains near Laudo, in their little caves, really deadly serious meditators. And Mary said, you can't describe, both physically and spiritually, the pristine energy of these high places, But what was interesting was this point. I found this very fascinating. Venerable Rene, he meditated at our marvelous retreat center, Ösel Ling, near Granada, up in the Sierra Nevada in Spain. It's near where Lama Ösel was born, Lama Yeshe's reincarnation. And it was called Ösel Ling. His Holiness the Dalai Lama was there in 1982, and he named it the place of clear light, Ösel Ling. And then Lama Ösel was born soon after that, and he was named after that, Ösel, Lama Yeshe's reincarnation. Anyway, it's a beautiful place. And His Holiness, I was there at the time in 1982. With His Holiness, because Lama Yeshe, this is a side story, me showing off. Lama Yeshe appointed 10 of us Westerners to be security guards for His Holiness in Europe in his 2-month visit. 5 girls and 5 boys. This is Lama Yeshe. It was so amazing. It was very shocking to see us 5 girls. Lama Yeshe, 3 of us were nuns, but he made us wear lay clothes. So I had hair, and he made us wear these little uniforms. And then the 5 boys had to wear their uniforms. They're all Swiss. The boys were all Swiss, I tell you, Swiss guards, like the Catholic Church. They had to wear grey slacks, a white shirt, I remember vividly, a maroon tie, and a blue blazer. And we had to wear these little green tartan, like Americans call plaid, skirts, a little yellow blouse, and a maroon jacket. The 5 girls and 5 boys. Lama Yeshe was too much, I tell you. I thought I'd won the lottery when I found I got this job. So we traveled with His Holiness for like 2 months, and in France, in Spain, and Italy. And I remember, this is in Spain. In this center would have been a few, hadn't been started very long. Lama Ösel wasn't born yet, 1982, and His Holiness, he named it that, and he said he said it reminded him of Tibet. So beautiful, so conducive for meditation, so pristine. I remember that, and I was there. Anyway, I'm just showing off now. But anyway, the point is this: Venerable Rene, 1993, 91, I forget the years now. Maybe it was earlier. Maybe earlier, I don't remember. He meditated for 2.5 years there, doing single-pointed concentration. And what that means is that was the only technique he did. You do 6, 7, 8 sessions a day, intensive, sometimes year after year. Pabonka Rinpoche mentions in Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand that you're going to accomplish this in 6 months. Well, clearly you've got to be pretty qualified, right? This is like several years he took, and he said he couldn't get past the 5th of the 9. He said he knew that. And this is where, the physical environment, as you get more subtle in your concentration, the physical environment is incredibly important. And so this is what he told me. It's very fascinating. I interviewed him about this retreat later at Kopan Monastery. Now, if anybody's been to Kopan, it's up on a hill in Kathmandu Valley, but it's very busy now these days, not in the 70s and 80s. But very busy now. Down in the valley, you got all the Hindus, because they put on their speakers loud as possible to Shiva and everybody in the morning at 4 in the morning. All the dogs are barking. It's noisy. And it's a place of 500 monks, busy place. But he said, this is the point now, that his mind got more subtle, more easily at Kopan. because of the blessing of the holy beings. All the Tibetans adore Kathmandu Valley. What we see is a polluted dump. What they see is this holy place, and that was really fascinating. That's the main thing. So if you're in a place that's been blessed by the holy beings, that's the best environment to be in, Then his mind was much more easily able to become more subtle. So the physical world plays a big role, right? It's very important to get the right conducive environment. Anyway, blah, blah. Yeah. So we can do this every day. Of course we can, before we do our other sessions, which is where we get to other types of meditation. So concentration meditation, and again, in general, people are so preoccupied with the concept of that being what meditation is, that you've got to make all the thoughts go away, blah, 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 so on and so forth. It's a skill that enables you to stay focused in order eventually, yes, for the mind, for the chatting to calm down, in order for the mind to go more subtle, in order to get this subtle focus, in order to then go to the second mode and get insight into reality. That's the bottom line. Now, there are hundreds of techniques. And I mean, in this book, let's have a look what she does, what she's got. There's different ones. So for example, the first one, we did this as meditation 1 in chapter 2, meditation on awareness of the breath. Maybe she taught it differently from what I did, but just to give you a different round. The next one is a lovely one called the 9-round breathing, and then the clarity of mind. Lama Yeshe talks about that in Mahamudra, and he says always that's a practice that's often done by the Tibetans as a prerequisite, as a preliminary to your other practices, because its function is to steady the wind energies, we won't do that now, maybe we'll do that one next week, to steady the wind energies. But this is a lovely preliminary practice to do. So there's lots of these meditations are just kind of extra little things that you can use to help your mind get steady. They have certain functions, but in itself, it's a very nice meditation. So I'll just describe it roughly, and you can read Sanghikaro's chapter, which is chapter 4, on your own. But roughly speaking, Lama talks about it in Mahamudra. It's a very nice little meditation. Here, it is using concentration, but it's also using conceptuality. It's also using thought. So what it is basically, and there's even a way to do it physically with your hands, but you don't need to do that. But you just simply, first of all, you visualize all the air coming out of your, I think it always let's see what she says. I got confused. They teach it differently. Hang on a second. Let me look for it. Page 36. What does she say here? Excuse me, sniffing. Page 36. So 9-round breathing. So you can use your hand, but you don't need to. But there is a way to do that. You can block the other nostril like this, with your fingers. But you don't need to do that. But you can look at what she says. But you do like this. The first is you use your right hand and your right index finger, you block the left while you're breathing into the right nostril. Let your breath come in slowly and steadily and pause for a moment and then block off the right nostril and breathe out the left. So you can do like this, which sort of seems busy, but there's many techniques that they use the body like this. There are certain practices in Tantra that they use. So you can do like this, 3 times in, 3 times out, and in and out like this. But let's forget the finger. So basically, when you breathe out through the right nostril first, what is this? She doesn't even mention what you're doing. Hang on a minute. Oh. Oh, goodness. She just talks about doing that, but she doesn't mention to think anything. Because the way it's going, maybe she's doing it at a very basic level. Okay, that's interesting. She's doing it at the most basic level, simply breathing out 3 times, breathing in 3 times. But the way Lama teaches it, and the typical way of the 9-round breathing, the first 3 breaths, you're breathing out your attachment. The second 3 breaths, you're breathing out your anger. And the third 3 breaths, you don't hold either one. You're breathing out your indifference, the 3 poisons, basically. But she doesn't mention, she just is saying to do it physically. That's fine. But you can add this extra part if you wish. So when you breathe, so she's saying, use your right index finger to block off the left, and you're breathing into the right. Then you breathe out through the left. So okay, you hold in through the right 3 times, in through the right, out through the left, in through the right, out through the left, and then you swap. So the extra piece to add which maybe she talks about it further down, I don't know, is when you breathe out, you're breathing out the first three, you're breathing out all your attachment, all your neediness, all your expectations, all your dissatisfaction, which is the energy of attachment. You imagine breathing out all that attachment, totally breathing it out. That's how Lama teaches it in Mahamudra. And then when you breathe in, then you breathe the next three through the opposite nostrils. You're breathing out all your anger, all your aversion, all your irritation, upset, frustration, depression. They're all aspects of aversion. And then the third three, you do both nostrils in and both nostrils out, and you visualize it's all your ignorance, indifference, uncaring, like the three poisons, basically. So then you can just do it simply like she's saying, or you can add these extra things. Maybe she adds them later. Let me see if she adds them on. No, she doesn't. Well, you do what she does, but you can add this extra if you like. First three, you're breathing out your attachment, your expectations, your neediness, all that business, your attachment energy. Next three, all your anger energy, and the third, all your indifference, ignorance energy. That's an extra component to add. Okay, that's the idea. It's a very nice meditation, and you don't have to use your finger. You just visualize. And then if you like, you can add an extra piece, which Lama Yeshe added. When you breathe in through the opposite nostril, you breathe in all the blissful, positive energy of the universe. And that goes into your nostril, goes in, down, and then drives out all the yucky stuff like yucky smokes. So it's a bit more visualizing involved by doing it this way. So that'll do from my side for the moment. Why don't you ask me some questions now? 10 o'clock, 10:02. Okay, ask me some questions.
Yes, Tentel, any questions? You may type it in the chat box. Please raise your hand or use an emoji hand. And also those of you at the center.
No questions? Everything's clear?
Looks like I don't see any hands. I see people practicing.
Okay, good. So, okay, now the next bit then. Okay, good.
Sorry, Linda got one. Sorry, Linda.
Good. Talk to me, sweetheart.
Okay, thanks. So I noticed that when I'm trying to monitor my focus on my breath, I'm probably not focusing on my breath at that point. And so there's like two things going on there.
What do you mean, sweetheart?
Well, if I'm focusing on my breath and then I start thinking about lunch.
Okay, so let's just put it another way. Your attention is focusing on the breath, and then your attention wanders off and starts chatting about lunch. That's what you're saying, right?
But then some other part is watching for me to not think about lunch.
That's your mindfulness part. The job of attention is to watch the breath. The job of another part called mindfulness is like kind of watching, and attention is like wanders off, and mindfulness brings it back, brings attention back to the breath. That's the job. That's it. That's the job. Do you understand? I mean, it's not easy. The words are simple. The instruction is simple. But of course, because our mind is so muddled, there are so many thoughts and we're so drowning in those thoughts, it doesn't seem so clear. Do you want the experience of it? Do you understand?
Yeah. And I think I spend a lot of time trying to watch whether I'm focusing on my breath rather than focusing on my breath. If that makes sense.
It does exactly make sense. And this is just because our minds are a big fat muddle right now. We've got this big emotional soup and we're so in the middle of it, it's hard to get any clarity. So you just got to be humble and keep trying. But it's always important. You've got to say, it's sort of like how to walk. Put this toe here and that toe there. It sounds easy, but if you haven't been able to walk properly for ages, it's too complicated. You've got to start with a simple instruction. And the instruction is attention. You pay attention to the breath. That's the instruction. Then when it wanders off to lunch, then mindfulness is the bit that brings it back. If you think of it, that simple instruction, you keep trying to obey that instruction and do your best. Just do your best. And no negative, no, I shouldn't be doing, because that's one of our, okay, let me say more about this one. I think one of our biggest obstacles is not that we can't concentrate, is not that our mind is messy, it's that we think it shouldn't be and we start to find fault. That's the real problem. Are you hearing me, Linda? I'm not saying you're saying that, But that's one of our biggest, oh, I shouldn't be doing this. We immediately go to the guilt mode, and that just makes it more ridiculous, you know? So we just got to keep watching that like a hawk and know and be humble. I mean, if Venerable Rene was totally qualified, he said he could not have gone to this retreat if he hadn't been a monk, hadn't done practice for years, hadn't done teachings for years, hadn't given teachings for years. He could not have been qualified to go to the mountains. And he sat there for 2.5 years and only got to the 5th of the 9. Then, honey child, we better be humble and practice and humble and patient, okay?
Yes, thank you.
Be happy with whatever result we get, because we're making effort, and practice makes perfect. So just keep moving.
And Mark has a quick question in the chat box.
Yes,
He asked, would you mention 5 states of mind, including attention, and mindfulness? Just wondering what the other 2 are.
Okay, so mindfulness is not one of the always present. I'm sorry. That's almost. It's the next 5, and they're called the object ascertaining states of mind. And but they're almost, as Geshe Tashi says, almost like they're there all the time. But the 5 always present are intention, attention, contact, feeling, and discrimination. 5. Then there's another 5 that are involved in doing things, and mindfulness is one of those. Concentration is another. I forget. But they're listed in the module 1 course notes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I think that might be the last one.
Okay. So let's talk a bit then more about this one of the obstacles, the problems. The main obstacle I would suggest is because we don't like our unhappy thoughts. Nobody is happy having depression and anger and jealousy and confusion and scattered mind. So then it's not comfortable. So then what we tend to do is we become dissatisfied with ourselves, and then we criticize ourselves. This is what we're doing all the time in a way. This is the irony of ego. So so this is the main obstacle. So this is the main problem. We think the problem is we can't concentrate. The problem is that the assumption that we should be better than we are. If we're truly content with whatever we do, we'd enjoy whatever 5 minutes we'd have, and we'd be happy with whatever we did. But we have this constant criticism. And we really have to try and learn to be more humble and more accepting of what we can do, you know. This is it. It's so powerful. So the second bit, Sanghakar talks about the importance of motivation. And this is really an absolutely vital piece when it comes now to this particular meditation technique. Because you see, as soon as we hear the word meditation, we assume it means spiritual. So then when we hear the word mindfulness, we assume it means spiritual. But it's one of these states of mind that is neither virtuous nor non-virtuous in its character. I like to call them the mechanics. So as Lama Zopa points out, thieves need mindfulness. So hear the point here. Mindfulness is simply one of the many, many, many parts of the mind that functions in order to do anything at all. You know, it's the ability to keep your mind on one thing before it becomes full-blown concentration. And its job is to bring the mind back to that object like we're discussing. So that's not in its nature good or bad, virtuous or non-virtuous. This is why it's crucial when we study the mind, we need to understand these concepts, because it's not how we talk in modern psychology. So therefore, sitting down and watching your breath in its nature is neither good nor bad, but we think it's virtuous because it looks like, we think holy means with your eyes closed, your legs crossed. It's not really absurd. So therefore the thing, and this is the view about karma, and when we go into the module about karma, we'll go into this in detail. The part of your mind that makes whatever action you do, positive or negative, isn't the action itself, it's your motivation. The motivation. So that means you can sit there, you can decide, I'm going to do the dishes. Why? Because everybody else looks like they're all busy, and I think it'd be good for me to help other people, so I'll be quiet and I'll just wash the dishes. That's a pure motivation. Your action of washing the dishes is a spiritual action. Let's say your hubby sits there all holy in his meditation cushion. Be quiet, would you? I'm meditating. And then he thinks he's being so spiritual No, he's being self-centered. So we can talk about spiritual activity, but the thing that makes it spiritual is the motivation. So this, especially when we're practicing the Mahayana path. So the more powerful and virtuous your motivation, the more beneficial your meditation, not just now, but for the seeds that you plant. This is the crucial point. This is session 3, chapter 5, the importance of motivation. So you please read it, okay? This is really important. That's why you start with a bit of taking your refuge. I'm going to do this meditation so I can become a Buddha, so I can benefit sentient beings. That one sentence as your motivation makes your breath meditation virtuous. But to sit there to thinking, you know, I'm feeling so neurotic, I've got to make all my bad thoughts go away and I'm going to try and get some more peace. That's better than nothing, but it's, you know, it's not very virtuous. So your meditation is not very powerful. So motivation is the key, you know. Motivation is the key. I wanted to say that to you. You read Sanghikaro's chapter on that. What's this? Okay, so let's go in the order that Sanghikaro goes as well. So the other thing is to in the Tibetan tradition, if you want to go off and do, you know, a meditation retreat in order to get single pointed concentration, the typical object you would use as your visualization would be the visualization of the Buddha. The visualization of the, and this is another interesting, very interesting point just to consider, okay? Because there are certain, in general, like I just said before, the motivation for why you do something is the thing that determines the character of that thing you do, washing the dishes, meditating, or whatever. But there are certain actions we do in relation to certain objects, as they say, that are so, because the object is so powerful, the motivation almost doesn't matter. So this is where any actions you do in relation to holy objects, Buddhas, statues, you know, texts, Dharma centers, anything that's a potent object of merit, so visualizing the Buddha just in its nature is 1 billion times more powerful and in its nature more virtuous because of the power of enlightened beings. So you can watch your breath for 40 million years. But you can, you know, and that's, depending on your motivation, it can be virtuous. But just observing the Buddha, saying the word Buddha, visualizing the Buddha, thinking about the Buddha, because of the power of enlightened beings, that's far more powerful, stupendously more powerful. We've got to think about that, you know, to see the logic of it. So then that's one of the most powerful ways. And that's why classically in the Tibetan tradition, you know, you do all your practice, you do all your, you know, you take refuge, you take your lay vows, you take your bodhisattva vows, and then you take an empowerment and into the different practices, and then you'll go off and do your retreat. This is the classic kind of 3-year retreat thing. You know, it's from the Vajrayana, and your retreat is involving the visualization of your yidam. So in combination of doing the practice, you're also attempting to get concentration on that yidam. So the power of those objects, the power of those meditations is far more than merely watching your breath. But you start, nothing wrong with the breath, nothing, you start with it. That's important to understand. So the typical one you'd use as your visualization to get concentration would be the object, would be the deity, you know. So in other words, it's still the same 2 modes of meditation. So the first mode of meditation, you would just get your concentration, and you would no. This is how you do 2 sessions in. This is even in ordinary days. Okay. Many things I'm saying here. So that's one point. Okay, the object of concentration. So now, let's look at the classical way before we get to the visualization. Doing Vajrayana, let's look at the classical way of using these 2 modes of meditation in your day-to-day practice involving the teachings. So, you know, if you read the Lamrim, you're going to see this term analytical meditation. And I mentioned this already, but we get very confused when we hear that, because we have these strong concepts that meditation by definition has got nothing to do with the mind. So analytical, so what does it mean? And how would you use this? And how would one session of meditation look, of using these two modes in one session? This is the classical use of these two modes in one session in the Tibetan tradition in relation to studying the teachings. Okay. So the first thing is you'd go to your class. Like if you're going to you're taking, let's say you've been to your class this morning. You've heard your teacher talk about karma. You've taken your notes, or if you've got good memory, you memorize it. So obviously, and this is why, this is why I use ordinary examples in daily life to show that it's the identical process. So let's say you've been to your math class. You've heard the teachings on that math. 1 + 1 is 2. You've heard it. You've heard your teachings on karma. Same thing. 1, you've heard it. Intellectually, you got the theory. Intellectual level up here, you got the theory. The first level is listen. You've listened. Now, what do you do with this? You know, using modern terms, you want to do your homework, which means if you're using the Buddhist language now, your teacher would say, now, Rabina, I always remember Miss Holton at my Catholic convent when I was first learned 1 + 1 is 2. Miss Holton said, now, Rabina, if she's a Buddhist, she would have said, now, Rabina, dear, go home, sit down at your desk. First of all, I want you to do the first mode of meditation and get some concentration so your mind is nice and focused. And then I want you to use that focus and go to the second mode of meditation. And I want you to think this through. 1 + 1 is 2. And I want you to get an insight into it. That's exactly what she would have said. And that's exactly what your Tibetan Lama teacher would say to you. Now, Rabina, I've told you these teachings about karma. I want you to go home, sit on your cushion, get some concentration first, do the first mode of meditation, get your mind nice and focused. So when your mind is focused to the degree that you've got focus, you now go to the second mode of meditation. And if you've memorized the teachings I've just given you, then you keep your eyes closed. And then what you will do is you will take the information I've given you, 1 + 1 is 2 / karma, whichever one, and you will think it through. Now, we know that's how we learn everything. But as soon as we say the words, you do your analytical meditation, we get confused because we don't have the clear definition of these words. But that's exactly what you would do with 1 + 1 is 2. And that's exactly what you would do with your E = mc², whatever the complicated thing you're learning. And that's exactly what you would do with your teachings on karma, emptiness, and everything else. You'd use your noggin at using the focus. The actual practice of concentration is non-conceptual. You're not involved actively in conceptuality. You're trying to train the mind to be non-conceptual. But then you use this focused mind, laser-like focus, if you've got it, in the second mode, but you use it to think. But clearly, if the mind is more subtle, the thinking is more subtle and therefore much more powerful. So the second mode of meditation, the goal is to get insight into the 1 + 1 is 2, into karma, into emptiness, into whatever it might be. That's the job of the second one. The technique you use to trigger that insight is literally thinking about it. But that means coherently. You don't just go 1 + 1 is 2, 1 + 1 is 2, 1 + 1 is 2, hoping for a penny to drop. What a ridiculous idea. You conceptualize it. Well, 1 means this, plus means that, 1 means this, equals means that. And you put these concepts together and then you'll go, oh, I get it. That's what analytical meditation is. But it's so confusing because we misunderstand the use of the word meditation. It's learning to use your focus, which you get from the first mode. You take that focused laser-like mind, if you've got focus, and then you use that laser-like mind in conceptuality to think clearly through the logic of karma, the logic of emptiness, or whatever it might be, or all your meditations on cultivating compassion. It's the same thing. You're using conceptuality. You're familiarizing your mind with karma, with emptiness, with compassion. It's actually very simple, but we get confused when we hear it. I need you to, I discussed this briefly last week, but I need to have us to discuss this now. This is a classical presentation of using the two modes of meditation specifically to help you internalize the teachings of the Buddha and make them your experience. This is one approach. There's another whole one is visualization. As you know, as we just Wolfgang mentioned last week about just letting go. There's many kinds of meditation. They all come down to the goal of you cultivating wisdom, you know, like Mahamudra, Dzogchen. Many different kinds of meditation. But here we're talking particularly when you're involved in the study of Buddhist philosophy, the philosophy, you've got your classical two modes of meditation in one session. You take your information from your class, I'm repeating it. You go home, you sit down, you get some focus in the first mode of meditation to the whatever degree you've got it. You then go to your second mode and you now recall the information you learned in your class, or you look at your notes, and because your mind is more focused, and now you try to think coherently and you try to put this information together until it becomes experiential. So I want you to ask questions about this particular process of internalizing the teachings, of doing your homework, in other words. I need you understanding what I'm talking about and ask me questions.
Open to questions. Chat box or a hand. Maybe a moment to reflect, and then the question comes.
You see, the trouble is, one of the other biggest problems, I've seen this in teachings over the years, teachings that I've attended, you know, as well. People say, oh, I don't want to listen to teachings. I want to practice. I want to meditate. So showing that we think they're separate, that they're kind of contradictory somehow. That's like saying, if in music class and you're learning the complicated theories of Bach's music, that's like saying, oh, I don't want to listen to all this theory. I just want to play the piano. Now, you know very well you cannot possibly play the piano until you've learned the theory. That we understand, but we don't get that when it comes to Buddhism, because we've got this addiction to thinking of meditation as something completely non-conceptual. So it's weird to us, you know. That's our biggest, it's one of the biggest obstacles.
Okay, we have one question in the chat box. Samuel. Sometimes he likes to ask, he asks, can you explain in more detail how to do analytical meditations, or will it come later?
But this is innocent. Okay, so, okay. Where is he? Can you talk to me, please? I want to ask.
Yeah, Samuel.
Where are you? Is it Samuel or Saul?
Well, he told me Samuel when I was in a group.
Okay, Samuel, so talk to me. So
Hey.
listen, okay, now I'll answer your question by asking you some questions. Have you got any particular expertise that you had to study to get? Have you learned something in particular?
Yes,
Like
but
what? Like
in
what?
mathematics.
Okay,
but
good.
It was a long time ago.
Never mind. But so would you please explain, would you agree with me if I tell you this following words to answer your question? Your first step was that you had to listen to the teachings from your teacher, didn't you? Do you agree with that?
Yeah. Yes.
Do you agree with that? Then what would you have to do with that information? What would you have to do with that in order to internalize it? What did you have to do then?
I'm not sure. I mean, I don't have it laid as a theory, like what's the next step?
No, but what would be the next step?
Confused.
But no, but listen to me. What did if you learn some math, you'd go home and do homework, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Wouldn't you do homework?
I guess the right thing is to get the concepts and
Listen to
I
me.
cannot.
Can you please keep it small? Samuel, can you please keep it very simple? That's why I'm purposely asking you about mathematics. You said you studied mathematics.
Mhm.
Did you?
Yes.
But you first heard the words from your teacher, didn't you?
Yes.
Then what did you do? What did you do to make the experience real? You went home and did your homework, didn't you?
Yes.
Do you agree with that?
Yes.
So you read your notes, you read the books, and then you thought about it. Did you not do that? And then you memorized it enough that you could even do an exam. Do you agree with that?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the process you used?
Yes, but one
Where's your
difference
doubt? Where's your doubt?
in mathematics, we always get the proofs for the statements.
No, you're not listening to my, you're leaping ahead. You're leaping ahead. But listen to me, in the beginning, you didn't know that in the beginning, when you learned 1 + 1 is 2, you didn't know it was true yet, did you?
It was such a long time ago, I don't remember.
But please hear my point, Samuel. Can you not hear the point I'm trying to make? You heard 1 + 1 is 2, and you just learned the theory. You didn't know it was true yet, but how did you make it true for you? What did you do to make it true for you?
I guess that I checked it. I guess that I
You
checked.
thought about it. You thought about it. You wrote it down. And at some point, you would have said, oh, I understand now. Wouldn't you have done that?
I guess, yes, it must have
Thank
helped.
you. Thank you. Stop here. That is analytical meditation.
Mm.
That thinking it through and making it real for you is analytical meditation. That's the term they use in Buddhism. Can you hear those words? Or are you still confused?
I'm still confused.
What about? Which bit are you confused about? So give an example of a topic in Buddhist philosophy that you would do analytical meditation on. Just name a topic.
Karma.
Thank you. So how you listen to the teachings about karma, you have a person explain to you the principle of karma. So like 1 + 1 is 2, you don't know if it's true yet, do you? You listen to the theory first. Do you agree with that?
Yes, yes.
So then you have to take it and you have to think it through theoretically first, Samuel. If it is either the view of karma is either true or it is not true. There are only two options. Now, clearly, proving experientially the truth of karma takes a lot longer than proving the truth of 1 + 1 is 2. But the principle is the same. You got to go home, you get your concentration, you go to the second mode, you then take the words you learned and you study and you internalize the theory of karma. You do it coherently. And at least the first step is you can present theoretically the meaning of karma. Eventually, when you get single pointed, direct experience of the truth of karma. It's time, but the process is the same. Are we communicating or not?
Yes, yes.
What is your doubt?
So can I say the first step is theoretically understanding the theory, theoretically.
The first is to listen.
Yes.
Then you think it through and try to make it coherent within itself, merely theoretically. You can't leap ahead to have a direct experience. You can't leap ahead and have a direct experience of acupuncture if you first haven't got the theory clear. And the theory intellectually first needs to be coherent. This is the thing, we are leaping. You see, our first thing is we say, oh, we can't prove karma because we haven't done the thinking. And eventually you might prove that karma is wrong. Just like you might prove that Einstein is wrong, and he will be happy to hear it. You've got to go one step at a time.
Okay.
Are we communicating?
Yes, it's better.
Good, I'm very happy. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This is the stumbling block. This is exactly, it's a stumbling block, Samantha. This is the whole point. Yes, Katrine. Katrine, yes.
Hello, Venerable.
Hello.
I think I have a somewhat similar problem understanding, because if I'm
Good.
thinking of my field, for instance,
Yeah.
I learned psychology. I'm a criminal
Yes.
psychologist.
Yes.
I can think about patterns I see in crimes.
Mhm.
I can have a hypothesis, but then
Mhm.
I have someone prove it or disprove it.
But you have to prove it or disprove it, don't you? You have
no,
to
I do the
disprove it.
hypothesis and then I
You
tell
have
it.
to. But what's the point of somebody else proving one? You can have the hypothesis that 1 + 1 is 2, but you have to prove it's true. What's the point of somebody else proving it's true? That's good for them, but not good for you. Maybe this is the difference here.
I think that's where I have a problem, because all I have to rely on then is to somehow trust that my mind will ask the right questions.
But you know, if you learn math, you will learn to know how to use your mind to ask the right questions. So it's exactly the same here. It's surprising to us to think this, because as soon as we think of psychology in the West, we don't give it any respect. We think it's all speculation. We just think it's subjective. We think we can't prove anything, but that's not the Buddha's view. So this takes us time to hear. It's a very good point. The Buddha's presenting to us his observation of how the universe is. And he says, if you bring your mind into sync with these truths, he's telling us this, then you will become an enlightened being and you will have removed all the delusions from your mind. Don't believe a single word he says, but you start through the process that he used. You get your concentration, you listen to the theory, you think it through, you first prove it intellectually as a coherent theory, intellectually, and then slowly with ever subtler meditation, and with ever subtler meditation continuously, you'll eventually have a direct experience of the truth of it. Or you will discover it's not true, in which case you say, thank you, Buddha, goodbye. That's the process, Catherine. That's the level of rigor and discipline and logic and analysis that we need to use. And this is a big surprise to us. This is Buddhist spiritual practice. And why we should prove karma to be true, it's not just to be clever and get full marks in our exam, is to stop suffering. Because Buddha says right now, our minds are completely familiar with no cause and effect, no emptiness, no compassion, delusions and garbage, which is why we suffer. So this is Buddha's methodology for quitting suffering and getting our minds in sync with truth and reality. So don't just swallow it whole. We have to prove it to be true. And Buddha says when you prove it to be true, that's equal to having the experience of it. And this is the process of getting enlightened. You with? Are we communicating?
Yes.
It's very interesting, isn't it?
Very, and very different.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
Thank you.
As the Dalai Lama says, if you're studying Buddha's methodology, using it sincerely in your daily life every day, if you do get to a point where you can actually prove from your direct experience that karma is wrong, then you must reject Buddha. Thank you, Buddha. You're very kind. Bye-bye. That's the level of rigor we have to use. But most of us won't get to that level because we don't have such sharp wisdom. We end up just liking Buddhism. You understand? But that's where we got. Nothing will, liking something is one thing, but knowing the truth of it is something very different. And we've got to eventually get to that point. Do you understand?
Yes, I do.
All right. Thank you so much. It's so fascinating. So incredibly important to understand these things. What else? People have 10 minutes.
Any other questions?
Wolfgang, do you have a question? I can hear your brain cells working.
No, thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, who else? Come on.
Michelle?
Yeah, so I have a problem that sometimes, or if often in daily life, I kind of go on autopilot. So I have difficulties watching my mind and analyzing my mind in daily life.
That's right.
Does concentration meditation help with that,
Yes.
so that I can concentrate?
Okay, that's a very good question. I've got to get my cord. My battery's about to go. Hang on a second. I've got to get out of my tight little spot here. Hang on. Okay. So this is why I would say one of the great advantages that is not evident to us initially of doing 5 minutes of concentration meditation in the morning. You might not get concentration. It's going to be quite a while, but do not think there's no benefit. So one of the key benefits is this, and I talked about this last week, but it's good to say it again. What you think about it, what you're doing in that 5 minutes is you're doing the technique of trying to pay attention to the breath and bringing it back, bringing the attention back to the breath when it wanders off. It doesn't mean you're going to be successful, but one of the key benefits, Michelle, is that you can't help in that 5 minutes become super conscious of all the crazy thoughts. You see, most of the time in the day, we're so preoccupied with the traffic and the people that we're not noticing the thoughts. Because, as you said, we're on autopilot. So at least in that 5 minutes, you are training to watch the breath, but you can't help but be vividly aware of all the crazy thoughts. In fact, we often think our mind is getting more crazy, but no, it's because we're now aware of the thoughts. So then you're not paying attention to the thoughts in your meditation, but you can't help but hear them out of the corner of your eye. You understand? So now that skill of noticing your thoughts while you're watching your breath is what you bring to your daily life. And while you're washing the dishes, while you're driving the car, while you're talking to your mother, you now can also be much more conscious of all the thoughts behind, and you can learn to hear them. And then you learn to be more and more aware and more conscious and grab them and change them before they vomit out the mouth or you kill somebody. Do you understand my point?
Yes, thank you.
This is the real job of being your own therapist every day, every second of the day, being conscious and then beginning to have control over the thoughts, not just believing all the rubbish that pops up, you know, and being glad to see it. Because one of our biggest problems is we think we're getting worse. They even say this in the texts, that one of the signs of success of even the first of the 9 stages of single-pointed concentration is you think your mind is getting worse. It's not. We're just noticing it. And this is amazing. So we need courage for that, Michelle, because we can't stand our negative thoughts. We need real courage, and then to have the courage to know that we can utilize our positive thoughts to argue with the rubbish ones, not just allow the rubbish ones to run the show. You understand?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank
Very
you.
good point. Good. Fantastic, people. One more question, people? Anything else? I think we should summarize then. Okay, what I've talked about so far: the meaning of the word meditate, the function of meditation, the 2 modes of meditation, and the long-term goal of meditation. And then a little bit we talked about an example. If you're studying Buddhist philosophy, reading the teachings, going to the teachings, studying the Buddhist philosophy, and you want to internalize it, the methodology is to get 1, you listen first, you have it either in your mind or in your notes, and then 2, you go home, you sit in your session, you get some concentration, you hone your mind, and then you use that honed mind to go to the second mode. The goal is insight, a taste of it, and the method, thinking of it. That's called analysis. Analysis is just a Greek word for to think it through coherently. That's all it means. And that's why it was so good to, you know, Samuel's point and, you know, Catherine's point, because we're so, you know, like his point is, but I've got the proof of 1 + 1 is 2, but that's the job. We've got to prove the hypothesis. And that's why we've got to be patient and humble. And that's why another point I want to make, a point on this point. And that's why, for example, use acupuncture. Let's say I use acupuncture. We know if acupuncture or this is the point, any body of knowledge, music, math, acupuncture, engineering, you name it. If this is the point, if it is valid body of knowledge, if it is a valid body of knowledge, if it is valid body of knowledge, it has to first be coherent intellectually. You can't go to the subtle level of mind and have a direct experience of Bach's music until you've got the theories clear. It is so evident. So if Bach's music is valid, it's got to be coherent according to the model of musical theory. Absolutely brilliantly coherent. First theoretically, then you play the piano and get the taste. Then you think it through and you realize E equals MC squared. Then you think it through and you realize emptiness. It's the same process. But whereas we think religion is wacky, unprovable, irrational, all belief, that's the deepest misconception that we've got about religion. That's why when we hear Buddhism is religion, we think it's a contradiction, you know. If there's anything that Buddha says is true, that he has found from his own experience, can be found by us to be untrue, perfect, then it's not true. And if anything Buddha says is true, you can prove it to be true. First, theoretically. There's no such concept in Buddhism as it's a mystery. I mean, I know talking to my Catholic friends, I'm not being rude now. I remember these Catholic nuns, these wonderful nuns, they love the concept that it is a mystery, that by definition, you cannot know the truth of it. There's no such thing in Buddhism. There's no such thing. If it can't be first presented theoretically, then you can say it doesn't exist. But knowing it only theoretically is nothing. That's like, as Lama Yeshe says, it's like confusing a pizza for the pizza packet. So that's our big problem in our culture. We're so addicted to theoretical knowledge. We think we're all these smarty pants saying things theoretically, but we have no experience. And that can be the biggest danger with the Buddhist philosophical approach, because it's such brilliant theories, such amazing concepts, you know. We can easily get captivated by the theories and forget that we have to have an experience, you know. And meditation is the technical methods for utilizing all this, for the technical methods for internalizing all this. So that'll do today. So you need to read Venerable Sangha Kodo's chapters, you know, read her first chapters, and then the second one, she goes into analytical in her own way. She describes it. Excuse me. She describes it. Motivation. She talks about lots of things in her chapter 5, I think. Okay, darling people. Thank you so much. So kind. Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable. Shall we have
put the prayers up? Yeah, well, why not?
a quick dedication before you leave? One moment. The screen. We may have a little glitch there with the screen. There we go.
Okay, so then we think this, we'll say them in English. So we make this aspiration, you know, may the precious supreme bodhicitta, awakening thought, this amazing shift in the mind when only others are in the forefront of our wish, which is a highly advanced state. May this precious supreme bodhicitta that hasn't yet arisen and grown in the minds of others, may it grow, may it arise, and may that which has arisen in the minds of others, may it not decline, but increase more and more. And then just thinking this other dedication, I think the one before it. The one before it, I think. That's it. So this one, and I'll just say it in my own words, longer. So we think, here we've been at 90 minutes, and as many thoughts as we've had, as many seeds we've planted, because nothing goes astray. Everything is stored in the mind. So may all these thousands of seeds we've planted, may we nourish them from this moment forward with our effort, with our hard work, with our meditation, with our thinking, with our analysis, with our virtue, with our goodness. May these seeds, may they grow and grow and grow, eventually manifesting as our own Buddhahood, so that we can, just as we motivated, lead every single suffering sentient being into enlightenment. That's it. Thank you, precious ones. Thank you so much, Lars. Thank you so much, Tara. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, darlings. Much love.
Thank
See
you,
you next week.
Venerable.
Do your
See you
reading,
next
please.
week.
Read Sanghya Cargo. It's got lots of information in there, you know. Thank you so much. Bye, darlings.
Thank you. Good evening.
Bye-bye.